Okay, here we are for number 9. This is the big climactic finish to our Chapter 6 practice problems for the Z-score. It says, in a medical study, the mean systolic blood pressure is 120, and the standard deviation is 8. So part A, it's going to take us a little bit. Says, what systolic blood pressure reading would put someone in the top 10% of the population? Okay, so we know what the average blood pressure is. We know the standard deviation. What blood pressure would put somebody in the top 10%? Seems like a good thing to know. Seems like a reasonable question. Okay, well, it's maybe not a surprise. I've got a big drawing for us here to lay out the game plan. So I've noted the mean and the standard deviation. That's a good idea. And I'm going to draw my normal distribution. 120 is at the center, and I've shaded off the top 10%, what looks about like 10%, and I put a question mark there. So we want to know what blood pressure would cause somebody, where's the cutoff? What blood pressure cuts off the top 10%? Okay, so what we're going to do, first thing we're going to need is the Z-score that goes there. Once we have the Z-score, then we'll have to use that to figure out the X. Okay, so we know Z equals X minus mu over sigma, right? We know these numbers already. In the end, the answer is going to be X. What blood pressure? Is it 130? Is it 140? You know, whatever it is, the value in question is an X. So if we can find out what Z is, then we've got 3 out of the 4 variables we can solve for X. Okay. So here we go. I just pulled that down. I realized I should have said something else. They're asking for the top 10%, but our table of Z-scores always tells us how much below. Well, if there's 10% above, how much is below? And okay, I know you're all answering there. It's 90%. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to find the Z-score that cuts off 90% below. So here's what we're going to do. The probability that capital Z is less than little z equals 0.9. That's going to tell us the Z-score. Now, if you grab your table and you try and find 0.9, it's not going to be there. And okay, you know, that's the way it goes. What we're going to do is just find the closest thing that we can in our table to 0.9. And so I'll give you a moment. Look in your table. Try and find 0.9 in the middle of the table and get the closest thing to it. So if you start looking, you know, maybe I'll pull mine up here. I'm in the positive Z-scores. I'm trying to find 0.9. There's 0.89, getting a little bit bigger, getting a little bit bigger. It's between these two, right? And the one that's closer is this one, 0.8997. So I'm just going to go with that. The Z-score, 1.28. So it turned out I couldn't find 0.9. This is the closest I could get. And when I work backwards, my Z is 1.28. Okay, this is great. I know the Z-score that goes there. So I know the Z. I know these other two. I can plug all that in. Find the X value for this Z-score. Okay, kind of explain that well enough. I plug everything in, the Z, the mu, the sigma. And a couple steps later, I'll just reveal it here. I know the X value that cuts off the top 10%. Turns out, oh, well, 130. All right, 130.24. If you are at that or above, then you're in the top 10% of, what was it, systolic blood pressure. these questions, seriously, I find this drawing so helpful. You know, kind of draw that, shade it. I know they're talking about the top 10, so that's, and then that really helps me visualize what I'm supposed to do next. All right, let's move on to part B. Part B is a similar idea. It's got the same beginnings, right? Turns out part B does the same thing as part A, the working backwards, but it happens twice. Okay, so let's take a look here. Part B says a researcher wishes to select people in the middle 40% of the population based on systolic blood pressure. He wants people that would fall in the middle 40%. Find the upper and lower readings that would qualify somebody. Okay, so here's my drawing. I'll show you guys this much for now. Try and tilt it. There you go, okay. So I know my mean is at 120. The middle 40%, I'm going to draw symmetrical lines like so. So I've got 20% above, 20% below on either side of 120. I need to find the x values that cut off the middle 40%. Okay, so that means same as the last problem, but I have to do it twice. So what are the z-scores for each one? And then once I know the z-scores, I can use my formula to work backwards to find the x's that go with it. Okay. Well, how do we even begin to find these z-scores? So this is something I find useful. I'm going to label how much of the data is below each one of these locations. So I know if I start at the middle, if I'm right there at the center, 50% of the data is below. So when I move here by 20%, well, now I know that 30% is below this number. And if I go up, I know 70% is below that number. Always thinking, how much is below, right? That's what my Z table does. So I've got my 50 in the middle, I move 20 this way, I move 20 that way. Let's begin with this lower reading. I'm going to do that one first. The lower X value, or Z score, really is how we got to start this. Okay, so I'm going to say, all right, probability of Z less than little z equals 0.3. Again, I'm not going to be able to find 0.3 in the table. I'm just going to find the closest thing that I can. I know I'm on the negative side here. Well, what's the closest thing to 0.3? So I'm looking in the middle of the table. It looks like I need to go down a little bit. Okay. Closest thing I can get to 0.3. It's between these two. 0.3015 I think is the closest I can get. So I'm going to use negative 0.52. Z is negative 0.52. Okay. I'm going to find the z-score for the upper. So I know that this probability should equal 0.7, 70%. Again, I'm not going to be able to find 0.7 in the table. I'll let you guys take a look while I search for it at the same time. If you need to pause so you can find the closest thing to 0.7 in your z table in the middle. Okay, so the closest thing you can get, just pull it up here, 0.6985, which is hey, is that a coincidence? Positive 0.52? Is that a coincidence right there? No, it's not at all, because all this is symmetrical. If this is up 0.52, then that would be down 0.52, because we move the same percentage of data. Not a coincidence whatsoever. Okay, we've done the hard work at this point. Now it's about finishing it off. Find the x values for these z-scores. We're going to set up these two equations where z is negative 0.52, where z is positive 5.52. We're going to solve each of them for x. And I didn't show any steps here. I'm going to trust you guys. You can find these two numbers. And that at that point, we've got it. The lower reading, 115.84. The upper reading, 124.16. If somebody has their systolic blood pressure between those two readings, then they are in the middle 40% of the data, and they would qualify to be in the study done by this researcher. Okay, that is it for the z-score portion, which is the majority of the portion here in Chapter 6. We've got a one more idea and one practice problem to finish this off, so I'll see you guys in that video in a moment.